on, Joe. Remember what you said on the show? Life's a garden. Dig it.
Hey gardeners, hope everything's growing well in your garden this season. These blueberries are looking really nice here in our container garden. Thanks for watching the Urban Gardener channel. Now let's get growing. All right, gardeners, welcome to Let's Get Growing, your weekly gardening live cast here on the Urban Gardener channel. I'm Enoch, and I'll be your host today. And on our show, we have with us Matt Powers coming up here in a little bit. Matt Powers is a author of several different books, including Regenerative Soil, Permaculture Student, and he's also a host of a podcast called The Regenerative Future. So he'll be joining with us here in just a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about some soil science and gardening and all of that. So I'm really excited about having a conversation with Matt coming up. And also you as well too. It is 4th of July week. As you can tell, I got my flag stuff on today here to celebrate the Independence Day holiday this week. And what are you all up to? I want to know what you're all up to for this 4th of July week coming up here. So let me know. And if you are here joining with me live, get into our chat there. Let me know what you got going on. Let me know what you're doing in your garden this year, what you got growing on, all that sort of stuff. If you have any questions or anything like that as well, too, jump into the chat box, especially when we got our guest coming up here in a little bit too. So you can ask some questions while he's here on the show with us. That'll be really great. And we'll ask him all of those questions that you might have. And if you are joining with us here too, on our replay. Thanks for joining with us on the replay. Really glad to have you as well too. So be sure to also get down into the comment section down below and let us know that you're here as well too. Love getting all those comments on the after show when we get to see all the people who are watching and checking out the show on their own time and watching the replay. And I love getting all those comments coming in on our show for the replay as well too. So be sure to do that. And also give the show a big thumbs up too. Hit the like button and also the subscribe button as well if you haven't subscribed to the show yet. And follow along with all of our fun gardening adventures here on the Urban Gardener channel, where we're basically just celebrating the fun and love and passion of gardening here on the Urban Gardener channel. So come join along with us and subscribe, and as well to share with your friends. Let them know that we've got our Let's Get Growing show here every Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so they can come check out our show as well too. So be sure to share and go check out our website too as well at letsgetgrowing.live. And also, as I mentioned too, if you have a question, be sure to ask it. We might feature it here on the show, especially for our guest coming up here. And also, one of the best ways that you can support our show too is to support our sponsor. Our show is sponsored by Ivy Organics. You can go check out all the great things that they have at ivyorganics.com. You can use our promo code GROW10, GROW10, get 10% off at ivyorganics.com. So awesome. Get all of that stuff done there too as well. So again, thank you all so much for joining with me again here today. We're having another great fun show. We'll have like I said, Matt Powers joining with us here in just a little bit. Have a talk about some soil science. We had a really great show last week. If you hadn't had a chance to check out our show with Nate Murray, the Garden Viking, last week, really awesome show. Really great to have him joining with us. And yeah, and all of his Viking fans and followers who just kind of basically stormed our show last week and showed up in mass, and was just really fun. We had a really great conversation about all sorts of things going on in gardening, and on his channel, the Viking Garden Like a Viking. And yeah, it was just a really great show. So if you haven't had a chance to check out that show, go back and check out that in our past shows, as well as some of our other shows. We've had tons of really great guests here on our Let's Get Growing show so far this year. Tons and tons of really awesome guests, and I think it's getting to the point where really it would just be too much to try to sit here and name them all right now when it comes down to it. But yeah, definitely go check out some of those past shows too if you haven't seen any of those as well, and leave some comments, and hit the like button and all that sort of stuff as well too. So yeah, awesome. What are you all up to here for the 4th of July? I'm sure that we got our comment in the comment there. Darth X, Canada Day in Canada. Yes, celebrating quite a different holiday there in Canada as we are here in the US and all of that. But thanks for joining with me here as well too. So happy Canada Day to you there as well, Darth. So awesome to have you here. Thanks for getting into the comments section and joining in with the conversation. I want to hear about all of what all of you got going on. So if you haven't gotten into the chat box yet, we'd love to hear some questions and comments and all of that as well too. So let's see, 4th of July. There's a saying in gardening, knee high by the 4th of July. And that's kind of a saying when it goes to your corn, that you want, that's kind of a measure of whether or not your corn's on time, or if you've got it planted on the right time. So, and if you know how fast corn grows, kind of like maybe to plant it a couple of weeks before the 4th of July, it'll be knee high by about that time. Corn does grow pretty fast as well. And so we've got lots of corn growing on around our different garden spaces, mostly over at our front yard garden over at my friend Mike's place. We've got just a big, large section of corn growing this year. And I had so much corn seed this year that I also planted some this year in our alleyway spaces. I haven't done that for the last couple of years. Well, actually, no, a couple of years ago, I did put some out. It didn't do too well. And so I didn't really grow it the next year. And so this year I thought I'd bring corn back to our alleyway garden space. We had plenty of seed this year, which I think that's kind of what kind of changed the course of what we were doing with corn, because I grew corn in our alleyway spaces probably, maybe first, or not the first season, but maybe the second season. I started growing corn almost right away. My neighbor grows corn, so I was kind of like encouraged by seeing all of his really cool corn stalks that are growing along his portion of the alleyway gardens that we have out there. In fact, he was the inspiration for all of my gardens that I have in the different garden spaces in the alleyway, and expanding our spaces into some unused city spaces, which is just alleyway spaces, curb spaces. There's all sorts of different kind of like unused, just little spaces, small spaces that we can kind of, just kind of use, take and grow some things. And that's what we do in our alleyway here. And when I first moved here, before I really got started in vegetable gardening, I'd already been kind of dabbling in some things, but before I really got started in it, I would go outside each day during the spring and watch this kind of garden start to flourish right out of his alleyway space that's right across from my place. And again, he'd have these corn stalks that would just grow really tall. um, he grows this variety of Mexican white corn that just, I mean, 14, 15 feet plus, maybe tall, even. These things will just grow huge. And so I'm watching this stuff grow. And that's kind of when I'm seeing, like, oh man, we could do more. I can grow more. And that's when I really started expanding into my space. And really, my garden passion was really starting to ignite around that time. And it was really cool that I had this neighbor right next to me who was doing a similar thing with growing food in small spaces. And so I was able to kind of catch on with some of the things that he had growing on, and started um, building and setting up my patio gardens. And then eventually myself starting to venture on and take in on some of the alleyway spaces that were left over that he wasn't using. And so quickly we started growing corn. And corn just is kind of one of those things. He grows the big, tall white Mexican corn, and it grows up. And I think the cool thing is that our corn is kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say very close to each other, but close enough that they could cross pollinate in a way. But the variety of corn that he grows takes a lot longer for it to put out its pollen and its silks on its corn. So if I time it just right, I can get some of these early varieties of corn that I can plant in my spaces, and they'll shoot right up. They'll put those tassels out, and the silks will come out, and all that pollen will start going. And by the time those are all done pollinating, and the silks are all drying up, and those kernels are starting to form on the corn, um, then it's still maybe just a little bit of time after that his corn starts to do the same thing. So the timing is a bit different. So we're not actually really kind of having that opportunity to cross pollinate with our different varieties that we grow in our alleyway. And uh, and so, yeah, so we grew that for years and years. I had lots of really decent harvests of corn. I've had some not so good years of corn, and that kind of led up to a few years ago, which was kind of a really weird experience. Now, mind you, I was a little bit late getting started on my corn. It was probably right about now. Instead of knee high by the 4th of July, like I was saying, what I ended up doing was, getting or wanting or starting my corn at around this time, which would have been, a couple of weeks a bit late in getting them started. So, I didn't have corn seed. So I went out to go find corn seed, and couldn't find it anywhere. I mean, I drove all over the place. And I know I was a little bit late to getting some corn planted out. And it would be the same thing this year if I tried to go out and plant corn right now. Um, it would be the same thing. So, and I know I've seen corn seed out everywhere still right now. So this year, it was just, there was no corn seed anywhere. I don't know what it was. It was the weirdest thing. And why was it corn? I'm not too sure, but I couldn't find corn anywhere. I went all over the place. And at first, I was just hunting for seed. And once I had probably ran out of places that I could look for corn seed, I started going to check the nurseries to see if maybe they have any corn starts left over. And again, another chase all around the area that I live in, and finally found a nursery that had a couple of 6 packs of this variety of corn. And we put it out into the garden. And when I started pulling it out of the 6 packs, I could tell we were in trouble to begin with, because they were really root bound. And corn's just one of those plants that, it has a fast growing root system. once those things start growing, they really start growing. I mean, it's amazing to watch how fast corn will go from sprouting to being a really full size plant to actually producing corn. I mean, it's really amazing. They grow really fast. And that means that those roots are really trying to push their way into the ground. And if you're stuck inside of these 6-pack starter trays, um, they're just winding around, not going anywhere, and that's just really stunting the growth of those corn plants. And it was enough to really just kind of do them in for the whole season. So all I had was just to really experiment and a lesson in learning that don't get your corn started a little too late, because you might run into some supply issues when it comes down to it. And that's what we had. And we were left with these corn starts that, I did plant them into the ground, and I didn't get much of anything. I mean, the plants maybe grew another foot or two, and were just really stunted and didn't do much of anything. So a really good, it wasn't a really good year for corn. And then I think I tried again the next year with this newer variety that I wanted to try, and didn't get a very good crop off of that. So I just didn't grow corn last year. Um, I didn't really bother with that. We were doing a lot of other projects and stuff, so I just decided to pass on corn. And this year, ended up getting some corn seed from a friend, and so I decided at that point, well, I'll just get a little bit more, and we'll have plenty of corn. We'll grow it over at Mike's place in our large 20-foot by 40-foot front yard garden plots that we have there. And, and we'll see what happens when it comes to that. Already, though, again, it is the 4th of July, and all of these plants are already well over a knee high. So they're all doing really well. We've got a really cool, big, full stand of corn over there. So I'm really hopeful that we're going to get a really good, decent harvest of that off of the crop that we get there, and as well here too, because they're all looking really good. Um, there's a couple that aren't getting some light that are already starting to get in shade out. So a couple of the stalks aren't going really that far, but for the most part, most of them are all doing really well. Let's see here. We got Rob joining with us. Good day, everyone. Rob, thanks for joining us. Here I am celebrating our 4th of July Independence Week here in the U.S. And my first commenters of the day are from Canada and England. But it's great to have you guys here, Dart and Rob from Rob's Allotment Gardening. So good day to you, Rob. And let's see, Dar said, I wasn't going to grow corn, but I found bodacious corn starter 6-packs for $2. So I got them, and they're in the soil. And then he says, we'll see if I get anything. Yeah, I'm sure that, like if you're getting them and they're not in there, I think what my problem was with these 6-packs is that, if you're getting in and you're buying them, I think I just waited way too long. Those things probably just sat in that nursery for so long, just building up a huge root bound roots that, by the time I was able to get them into the ground and start growing, I think it was just a little bit too late for them. So I hope that that's the case for you, though, too, that your 6-packs that you got them good, you got them soon, and we're able to get them right into the ground. So yeah, hopefully you get some really good ones. Bodacious corn, that is a variety that I've grown a couple of years. That is probably the best I've had in the different varieties that I've tried growing was bodacious. I think this year, though, we're growing, I think it's like candy corn is what it is. It's an early variety. And that, again, too, comes to the fact that I was gifted some corn seeds. So I kind of went with the same variety, and went and got some more of that same variety. And then that's what we used for our corn seed this year. But yeah, really looking forward to it. It's kind of again, such a fast growing plant. So it's kind of one of those fun ones to watch in the garden as you plant out some seed. I actually kind of soak my seed for a day or so and then kind of rinse them, to keep them kind of wet until they start uh, pushing out roots. And that way I can kind of make sure I'm getting 100% plants when I'm planting them out. And just as they start to push out the roots off of the seed, then boom, I pop them right into the ground. And then within days, they're already popping up out of the ground. Within days from that, you can tell that you've got a nice, uh, you know, stand or group of corn. And that's an important thing too, though. You want to think about, and that's one of the things that we kind of limited to a little bit when it comes to our alleyway space as well, because these are just small strips that we're growing on. I do have kind of a little bit of a wider space that runs right along what is my kind of driveway of my carport. So I've got a space right there that's just a little bit bigger, and that's what we use for our corn stand there, just so that we can get as many in as we possibly can. Because it's really important to have, um, you know, several plants together. It's going to take, more than one for sure, but you want to have, I would say that I don't do anything less than maybe 10 plants in a group. Um, More even better at that point. That way, because corns pollinates by the air, and they gotta spread pollen around and get them on all of those little different silks, because it takes pollen to hit every single one of those silks to get a full um, ear of corn. So you want to make sure that you have enough plants all together so that you're getting enough pollen floating around all over the place in order to make sure that they're all pollinated really, really well. So yeah, that's what we've got going on with that. Hopefully, you guys all have some really good corn and everything's growing as well too. That's just my advice on that: is make sure that you're growing plenty. And again, it doesn't work out too well for some of our small spaces. You can even grow them in containers. I've actually did that several years ago. I took some of our 5-gallon containers and grew some corn in those, and I set up several different kind of containers together so that I had a good stand of there was probably only around 10 that time when I did that in those containers, and that made sure that we got good pollination, and we ended up getting a few really good heads of corn, or ears of corn, heads of corn. We got some really good ears of corn off of those that we grew in the container too. So lots of different ways that you can get those things done, but it's really best to have multiples when it comes to corn. A good amount of them, together, to really make sure that you're going to get good pollination off of those. All right. Other news on the show too that I wanted to cover with you all really quickly here as well is that we do, and I tested this out last week for our show last week, and we started also live streaming on a new channel. And it's a new channel for us. But it's just basically a standalone channel for the Let's Get Growing show. So that's something I tested out this last week, and I think that's something that we're going to continue to do moving on forward. The show will still be airing right here on the Urban Gardener channel as well too into the foreseeable future. But what we're going to do is start migrating as much of like the replay content and all that sort of stuff onto its own channel. So eventually, the Let's Get Growing show will have its own channel altogether. And I did put a link right down in the description below for everybody to go over to the new channel there and subscribe to that new channel for me. Help me build up some subscribers for it. And eventually down the road, the idea is, though, that we will have the channel mostly done on its own channel. I think, again, too, definitely into the foreseeable future, we will air the live stream here on the Urban Gardener channel, and it'll be available for the live streaming audience here on the Urban Gardener channel. But then I think eventually what we'll start doing down the road is after it airs live here, we will have it only available for replay on its new channel. That's just something we're working on, something that's going on down the road. But all of our segment cuts and different things like that. In fact, I'm going to be uploading all of our older episodes and all of our older segments and all that sort of stuff onto this new channel. So those will all be eventually only available over there on the new channel as well too. So we just want to kind of see what happens there too when we kind of do that. It's been kind of one of the big questions that's kind of been overhanging the whole show idea since I started it, was whether or not this was going to be something that was an Urban Gardener channel, something that we're going to, fit into what we do there versus something that maybe should have its own thing. And I think that's where I'm leaning towards now, is that it should, we're going to move towards it having its own thing. And, and we'll do that slowly but surely over time here. And so for the next few weeks, I'll definitely be bugging everybody to get down in that description and click on that. I have it available right into the top of the description there too, so that you can go and subscribe and start following us over there on its own channel as well too. So love to see people subscribe, leave comments, like the show, all that sort of stuff as well too. That stuff really helps out the show and everything as well. And so that's really been something I've been working on over the last few days. A couple of days ago, I did get a visit too, and this really isn't much for the audio audience because I gotta put this up. Maybe the camera can see this, I'm not sure. But look at that. For everybody who's watching the live stream or the replay right now, I've got this container here, a channel called The Fig Hunter. David over from the Fig Hunter, him and his wife stopped by. They were traveling through the area, so they picked a bunch of ripe figs for me, and they stopped by and they dropped these off for me so I could taste them. We've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe even more different varieties of figs in here that are all ready. And so that's what I'm going to be doing here, is tasting and checking those out here. I'm really love figs. They're actually one of those things that are kind of new to me. I talk about this on the show a little bit. I was a picky eater growing up, and so things like figs or things that were different, would have been something I would have pushed away from for sure when I was younger. And now that I'm older and I got to, expand my horizons just a little bit more, I found when I first tasted figs that they're probably one of my favorite things anymore too. I would have totally avoided those when I was younger, and I absolutely love them now too. So that's one of the things, if I could ever go back and tell my younger self, is to try some of this stuff. You won't be disappointed. But so that's awesome. I got all these different figs I'm going to get to try here real soon. So that's what I'll be doing later this afternoon. Again, too, everybody in the chat box, let us know that you're here. Let us know any sort of questions or comments or anything as well, too. And again, we'll be right back here in just a moment to talk with our special guest today. Let's Get Growing is sponsored by IV Organic.
IV Organic all-purpose fertilizers offer your plants everything they need to have the most productive, fruitful, and longest-lasting lives. For all plants, including your fruit trees, vegetables, ornamentals, and roses and flowers, in-ground or potted plants, young and established, the 6 macronutrients that all plants need. Macronutrients are those elements that plants need in abundance and include nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, sulfur, and calcium. Nitrogen helps with the greening of the plants and the growth. Phosphorus for abundance of flowers and fruits, plus drought tolerance. Potassium is for disease resistance, root development, and strength. Magnesium is the heart of the chlorophyll molecule, which is responsible for photosynthesis, converting waters and carbon dioxide with light energy into sugar molecules. Sulfur helps green pale plants turn dark green and necessary for optimal plant metabolic processes. And calcium, the building block of all plant cell walls. Ivory Organic all-purpose fertilizers have it all in both the super and premium blend products. The super blend simply has a higher percentage of the macronutrients plus azomite, which is derived from volcanic ash deposits, to offer your plants many of the micronutrients too. The product can be applied to the soil or as a foliar feed and even as a supplement to your compost tea. Ivory Organic all-purpose fertilizers are organic, effective, USA-made products to maximize the productivity, health, and life of all plants and trees. Keep growing with Ivory Organics, and wishing you all happy gardening.
All right, everyone. Now it's time for our featured guest. All right, this week's featured guest is Matt Powers. Matt is an author, educator, citizen scientist, entrepreneur, and a family guy who teaches people all over the world how to live more regeneratively. Personally driven by a deep desire to have the best food possible for his wife and their two boys. And Matt is a former public high school teacher with a master's degree in education. And he is the creator of over a dozen online courses and author of over 20 books on permaculture and regenerative soil. And Matt is also the host of a regenerative feature, the podcast and YouTube show where he interviews leaders in the regenerative space, shares his own work and insights. All right, everybody, let's welcome our guest today to the show, Matt Powers. Hey, Matt, how are you doing
how's
today?
it going, everyone? Thank you for having me here.
Yes, awesome. Really great to have you here on the show with us today, Matt. I don't know if you remember, I ran into we just kind of just have a passing by moment at an heirloom exposition a few years ago. And I didn't catch back up with you, which I was really regretting after I left the show and all of that. I was like, man, I really wanted to talk to that Matt guy. He's so fun. And I could tell that he could be just a really great interview. So I made sure that I put you on my list for some of our first shows that we're doing here on the Let's Get Growing show. And it's really awesome to have you here today.
That's awesome. So that goes way back. I haven't been to an heirloom expo in years.
I know they haven't had them for years.
Yeah, and now it's in Ventura. They're not really quite involved. I don't know if it's a new, if it's been taken over by someone else. So
well, I don't think it is. We did interview Jer from Baker Creek. He was on one of our shows a little while back ago, and he was telling us, no, they got it all going on. It's trying to make it as much the same type of event as possible, just in a newer location, you know, and different type of I don't know, exposure or whatever. But yeah, kind of interested in seeing what they got going on there and all of that. But yeah, it was a few years ago. It was definitely a few years back. We've had some space and time that have kind of passed by, and haven't had any of those sort of fun events, but everything seems to be back in gear again, and all of that. So again, that's awesome. But yeah, awesome to have you here today, Matt. I want to talk a little bit about soil science and all of that stuff. You know, a lot of our guests are awesome gardeners in their own right and all of that, but you're one of these people who really take it down to the molecular level, right? You know, and just really kind of make soil science really fun too. I've watched some of your talks and different things you've done and all of that too, so I think you really bring a great approach to that sort of learning too. But it's really important learning, isn't it? You know,
well, when you have people who are professional farmers, orchardists, relying upon your feedback, and I have thousands of students in my online courses, you keep going, and the questions get harder over the years. And I have lifetime communities, and so they take the course multiple times, they get better questions, and so we've been digging deeper and deeper in all these different communities. And I've been like, oh, I need to figure that out. I need to map out the chemistry.
Yeah.
And then I did. And so with the support and really, I mean, it's encouragement, right? You know, these questions, this curiosity, the growth, this progression has led me to continuously going deeper and deeper down to the DNA even. So not just, you know, minerals and, you know, the things that everyone's testing for, the chemistry side of things, but the biology, you know, using a microscope, but also the biology down to the DNA. So I've been marrying all those things and running things through their paces through that, because very few things are seen through all those lenses. And once you do, you're like, oh, wait, effective microbes, EM1 is in all the good composts. It's not a bad guy. So it's like, it's, yeah, it's super funny. I mean, all like the best Elaine Ingham composts have EM in them. So they're actually like the essence of good compost. So it's fascinating how we can get tricked by doing only one test, doing one perspective. And so the key is to do what permaculture did, is to take a step back, say what's holistic, what's a universal, what universal principles are at work here, what are the natural cycles, and to look through that as a lens at what you're seeing. And so that's what I did with soil, and I started mapping out the actual soil cycles for each mineral. And there's not just macronutrients, there's micronutrients that are also incredibly important. And none of them had fully articulated diagrams, even at the graduate school level where they're just white boxes and arrows. They were focused on their goals. And so it's like, you have the environmental science folk, they're like, well, what heavy metals are leaching? And then you have like the ag folk, they're like, well, I want to just add just the right amount of fertilizer. I don't want any leaching because that's money being lost. And so you have these very different perspectives and goals around the diagrams that we did have. And then we had tons of them that didn't even exist. And so that was all written out as text. So you'd have like 4 pages of text to describe cycles of like cobalt. And so I turned it into a visual because that's the only way I could understand it.
Yeah.
And so I would do like drawing, and I'd be like, and then read the next part and be like, oh, and that means that's connected to that. And I'd be like, huh, I can see it now. And so I had to actually map those things out. And no one had done that before for me. No one had done that for my students. And so I did that work for my students. Like you said, I'm a high school teacher. I had sophomores. I'm the one that, you know, would grade I was an English teacher. I would grade all 200 kids' essays, right? And we do it multiple times, right? And so I do the work because it has to be done, because otherwise it's not fair. Right. You know, it's not fair for people to go around and say this is this and that is that if they can't verify it. And if it doesn't go across and we can't go deep and go micro to macro back to the fluency so that it becomes a pragmatic action. And that's what I do. I have a master's degree in education, and I came into permaculture and soil science. And so much of this was like, well, don't you do biodynamic? And I was like, I read the original source documents because, you know, I come from academia. And the guy, Rudolf Steiner, is incredibly racist. And like, it's frightening to read. But I mean, it's pre-war, World War II Germany.
Right.
And there's tons of racist stuff mixed in. And then you realize he gathered all the folk farming and then tried to find a universal thread through it, and then created his own ideas. Yeah. And so you're like, he's a product of his times. He did some great work gathering some things, but he's a product of his time and place. Can't turn him into a guru. But we also have to recognize how much of that was what was organic originally. It was. And then we've been in this process of learning, because some people did organic really great and they had good soil. And then people for the first time in 50 years got to see living good soil, and then plants grow in it. And then later on, someone started looking at that under the microscope and going, wait, there's microbes inside your food. And plants all evolved with endophytes, with mycorrhizal fungi, with microbes all over their surfaces. So inside, outside, on, in the roots, in the soil, these microbes are always there, but because of chemical ag, because of poison ag, because of all the synthetics, and the and even just the purification. You take a purified nitrogen, the nitrogen salt, and then you disassociate it, and it's just a pure nitrogen ion, nitrate. It's going to want to bond with everything around it, and that's why it destroys your organic matter, because it's pulling the carbon out of it to do a composting event right there in your soil. So this is all incredibly important to recognize, to map out, to connect, because it, just like we went and connected it all like that, everything is actually that connected, and you can come at anything from any angle, and you can step out and look at the holistic picture from any test if you understand the holistic. So I've been taking permaculture concepts of holism and holistic thinking and testing and verification, applying the best practices from my master's degree in education and all the time I've had in teaching. And then I've been doing all these next level tests, like direct reading nanopore DNA. So I don't do PCR. I don't like make the signal crazy. I have a direct read. So I've been able to verify things that no one else has been able to verify. I've been able to see things no one's been able to see, and then go to the scientists that are like at universities and in the like the CIRAD in France and be like, can you verify this? And they're like, oh my gosh, and so I've been able to prove things out. I've been able to verify things. It's been a crazy, wild journey. I think it's really what's so crazy is it relates back to hands-on. Like, oh, what timing is the hot compost going to be added? What are we going to be making a compost tea out of this, an extract, or it depends on all the insights I have now. So everyone's like, oh no, compost is good. Just add compost. Just like fungi is fungi. Fungi is not fungi. There's saprophytes. They don't actually help your plant, but they make your compost go fast. So we need to apply critical thinking to a lot of our gardening, to a lot of our soil, because I hesitated saying soil science, because all the stuff that's online is like soil hearsay for the most part. I mean, I tried to bring the science to the forefront and show the tests, show the texts, show the field trials, show the farmers. But there's a lot of people just saying things, and there's a lot of half truths that are like half accuracies. They're not like lying, but they only understand half the thing. They're like, well, the pH is this, so that must be bioavailable. It's like, no. If it's
I think
too
I've
dry,
seen a lot more of that, especially with this, whole sense of like, really popular lately are reels. People making really fast, short content. So you know what I mean? So within that, they're really blowing things up, by just going this, that, just to show people little flashes of information that, are not, I don't know. I just been kind of blown away with some of the things I've been hearing and seeing lately. And I don't know if it's much different than the stuff that was already going around, but it's just more in your face now. There's people just being flashier and more salesman type techniques and things when it comes to just ideas or tips and tricks and things, and let me throw things this way and that way, and now you're just really drawn in, and now I can just give you whatever information and you're just going to take it in. And I see a lot of that lately, especially when it comes to garden information and growing things, and these really neat tips and tricks that people come up with on doing stuff. So I think that's one of the things I really like about some of the stuff that you do, the stuff I get to read about and see with that sort of stuff, because you're really digging in there. You're in the soil. You got a microscope. You're looking at how these things are acting and reacting with each other, the microbes, the nematodes, the fungi, all this living stuff that's happening in our soil. And again, too, I really think this is another thing that happens too, especially with like a beginning gardener, a person who's newer to plants and all of that, is that there's just kind of a basic understanding. Plants have roots. You put roots in the soil for the most part. There's hydroponics, there's other things, but roots go in the soil and then they just grow from there. and then don't
I think
understand.
there's a reason
They
for
know,
that.
they know sun and water. They know sun and water, maybe a little fertilizer, whatever, that sort of thing. But I don't think a lot of people really understand the living life that's going on in that soil to make up what it takes for your plants to grow the way that they're truly supposed to.
I think there's a variety of reasons why. I think that we've rediscovered several of the aspects of this several times. That's why you find old texts talking about redox, for instance.
Yeah.
I think part of it is that unraveling this unravels our health. If you unravel this mystery, you unravel our health. And so this is why, like, I'll be in interviews and soil scientists will be like, okay, can you turn off the camera? And I'll be like, okay. And they'll be like, okay, so this is how it relates to health. And they'll start explaining how everything relates to their health and how it relates to our food and our animal health. And they can't say that publicly because the medical people in the EU will take away his ability to do science. And so, and they've made headway with animals. But the reality is, when you think about this, when Dr. Zach Bush says, oh, well, this treats, glyphosate poisoning and this helps heal your gut junctions. And really what it does in practical terms is it changes the charge on the outside of the cells of your body. That's redox. Reduction, oxidation. Oxidative stress is what is the precursor to cancer. Reduction, I know they're chemists, we got to forgive them. Reduction is the gain in energy. So antioxidants mean they're reduced. They have a lot of energy. And so this basic concept I brought to the fore with this book. And I combined it with the biology. I combined it with all these different things. But people are recognizing, they're like, and I'm mapping this out right now. The fact that there is microbes that are in our guts, that are in our manures, that are in the soil, that are in all the composts, that are inside all the plants that we eat and animals eat. So there are microbes that literally react to their environment, right? They're reacting to their environment because microbes are so small, they react to their environment much more than their indicators, their canaries in the coal mine. And so they're messengers and feedback loops between the biome of your stomach, the biome of the soil, the biome of the inside of that plant, and the biome of the inside of that ruminant. And we're eating these things, and that's why it's no wonder those microbes are in our gut. The microbes are and we're just mapping this out now.
Yeah.
So when people say, no, we only know 1 to 10% of the microbes, and they're soil experts and top scientists in the world, imagine if you were like, honey, I'm 97% just, I don't know about this next thing. Your wife would be like, you're not going to get in the car and drive anywhere. You're 97% sure you don't know where you're going? We're going to sit down and have a talk. But you know what I mean? We need to instead survey the land and form a map. And so that's really what I've been doing. I've been helping people take the steps back to see the larger picture. We got really myopic with the way we've done soil science, with the way we've done gardening, and instead of letting what's natural speak to us and what's actually happening showcase itself, we've missed the entire picture. And so that's why we have endophytes now. That's why people are like, I need to use mycorrhizal inoculant on my plant because that's not in my compost. Of course not, it's not, right? So people are putting things together, and it's that holistic understanding that's really required to understand our plants. But at the same time, you will understand yourself, your digestion, life.
Yeah.
Just the way we breathe. We exhale CO2. They inhale CO2. Yeah. Like, we're in this relationship together. The microbes that are inside us are also inside the plants. And
Yep.
so there's so much there. There's so much there to be learned, and it's a journey. It's there's a lot of growth, but the wild thing is, it's not that hard to grow great plants. You get out of the way, essentially. You set things up, you set the scene, you get yourself out of the way. But now I don't know if you've seen lately, I'm growing, vegetables that are this big around. And it's
Nice.
just because I'm listening with the feedback of all these tests, and then I've created these benchmarks so that other people, whether they have DNA testing or not, can apply all these things in a pragmatic, simple way, because I've been able to check things and discount a lot of things, and then highlight some of these things that have been around forever. And everyone's like, I don't know if it really works. And we now know they do. So I've been doing a lot of that work, debunking and validating. It's been fun.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really necessary though, too, as far as, again, going back to kind of the stuff you hear and see, there's just too many things that make you go, I just don't know about that. You know what I mean? You see a lot of that. I just don't know about that. People want all this, but when it comes down to it, a lot of things are really kind of basic if we're really willing to look at that. To look at these things work this way. That's been, like you said, it's been doing it for however long those things have existed. These things
that's how roots
have
work.
done that. Now, we're the newest thing to this whole process, when it comes down to it, and we have to understand that when it comes down to that sort of stuff, and especially nowadays, again, too, bringing up the idea that I think one of the hardest things I have about seeing and when I'm experiencing, when I'm going to a place and just kind of looking at what they have available, and I see all of these chemicals just all over the place that are just this for that or that for this, and just this really dangerous stuff that people just, I don't know. It's amazing to see. Again, I'll just put this in point. You go in, it's the beginning of the season, you see all the Roundup that's on the shelf. They got it stacked full. They got as many jugs as they need to where it's all nice and tight, the bright lettering, all this sort of stuff. And then it's amazing to see that in just a couple of weeks, how empty those shelves become. And I think that's where I worry the most, is because there's just too many people who are not getting basic science, basic things about how to care for the things that we're here to care for. And they're going to these methods and these things that are really, really dangerous for us.
So much of it is laziness too. You have these people just going on once a year with a giant combine, doing a cloud of grazon on their field to kill, some of the plants. Meanwhile, I mow, and so I've got beautiful grass because I mow at like 6 inches high. So I'm always taking out those tall weeds, and then the grass resurges, and over time it just takes over and it's just grass. It's really frustrating. So much of the work I've done in gardening and permaculture also has been just putting my shoulder to the wheel. It's one of the things I really try to like impart to my boys is it's like the majority of the world is not willing to do the work. And if you're willing to do the work, you will be shocked at at how far you can get in life, because people just look at work and go, "Ooh, that's a lot of work." And then they don't ever go over that mountaintop and discover the valley beyond.
Yeah.
And so it's like everything is about that. And so I've just been, and it's funny, I spent 2.5 years writing the Permaculture Student 2, and I've been able to like really speed up my process and get better. But it's in that investment of time and growth that I've been able to speed up other people's time and growth. And that book is free on my website, thepermaculturestudent.com. It's a 400+ page book. It's the first permaculture textbook that was ever peer reviewed. And it's the first one that was cited since the 1989 Bill Mollison's textbook. So I want people to have the information. I want people to be able to go back to the references and see where these ideas came from, to look at the actual farms, to be like, wait, there was a whole aquaculture system in Hawaii. What, Molokai? You know what I mean? Like, I want, and then or pre-Aztec cultures created the Chinampa floating gardens of
Oh yeah, I've
Xochimilco,
seen those.
right? My
Yeah,
my wife went and visited her parents who were on a mission down outside Mexico City, and
yeah.
they went on a tour of the Chinampas and videoed it. So there's a
Wow.
whole documentary which is free, a
Yeah.
whole film that my wife made, Adriana made down there of that incredible.
So
I
what's the
don't
name
know.
of that film?
It's the name of the film is De las Chinampas.
Okay. All right.
And
Yeah. I'd love to check that out. Yeah, and I say I've seen that, but I mean I've seen like pictures of like representations of it. You know, you'd have to go far back to actually see those, but I think that's some really fascinating stuff. And it's again things that people don't know and understand, and in like past ways that we used to, be more connected to the earth and the systems that are around us to use. You know,
or our immediate ancestors. I mean, let's get real. In the
yeah,
1800s in Philadelphia, someone who looked just like you or I was down there in the mud putting in piping, and the piping was all wood. And they sealed with resin from trees. And it lasted up until our lifetime. And they cut those pipes in our lifetime because they were resetting them. Stephen Reisner was telling me about this. We have it in our blood. It's part of the American story. It's part of the European story. We all were indigenous once too. If you go far enough back, I know Europe, you gotta go under the layers, but my people are the Celtic people from Europe. And so we all have this past, we all have this history. And if we look at them and we let, and you get accurate archaeological evidence. So much of it nowadays, the mainstream archaeology people are trying to suppress and stick to the 80s information. Totally bizarre. Boneyard, Alaska, if you ever check that out, flips everything on its lid. But if we just look to the past, we will be able to look to the future with completely new eyes. We'll be inspired. And in this moment, we are at the cusp of a completely new era of health. This is what we're doing with regenerative soil, the way we're going to be doing the Our Soil database, so that your compost, my compost, your soil every season over time, we all get to compare these things. And it's in a transparent database so that we can see what works and why, because we do holistic testing. This will change soil science as we fundamentally know it. It will make it so that the local compost companies, the best one everyone knows, the local the farmers market, they're like, oh, I always go with Sam's tomatoes because they have the highest bionutrient meter, density, and the bricks meter is through the roof. So, I eat less, but I'm always fuller and I feel better. So I love his food. And then, you know what I mean? And then suddenly everyone at the farmers market goes, all right, Sam, we're going to pay you to teach us all how to do what you do. And Sam's like, all right, this is great. Secondary income. And then everyone benefits in that whole community because they've got better food. And then out of that, someone figures out another edge. And they're like, well, Tammy's figured it out with the rock dust, with the pre-inoculation, and right. And then we push it further. We push further, and all boats rise. When we have this in our hearts, and this is part of the American dream, to think it better for our kids, they really do. We make our food better. We make our communities stronger physically, mentally, and we actually provide jobs, because all this stuff is regenerative. You got a seed, you got a seed pack, you know what I mean? You got a plot of land, and you got a cutting, right? It doesn't matter. From just as the little pieces, we can take off. We can start economies. Local economies all start with farmers. And then the excess abundance creates products that are value added, and then materials that turn into other things like clothing and everything under the sun. So we have all the pieces there. It feels like we live in a hopeless time when you look at the news, but I actually feel like they are the last dying gasp of a degraded, degenerative system that realizes we see the emperor wears no clothes. And the hour is nigh.
Well, let's hope so, for sure, man. I'm definitely for sure, and with definitely people like yourself leading the way too, to help us get past some of these more negative aspects of our knowledge when it comes to
It can be painful
food.
finding
I
out
mean,
this
food,
stuff.
when it comes down to it, this is food. This is our life source when it comes down to it. And our life source is found in the soil. We need to know a lot more about what and how it actually works. I think it's important for everybody, even, for myself, I've just kind of naturally come to trying to learn a little bit more about, how things work in my garden as I've been kind of a student, learning along the way in my own workspace, seeing how things work versus doing other stuff, but it was really right off the bat, learning about, the difference in, bringing up again the chemicals again versus doing things organically, how those sort of systems work versus the others, and it was just immediate once you learn about, all of the different, again, this life going on in the soil, these microbes, these nematodes, these all these different things, the fungi, how all of them connect and work with each other to create this this biome, this medium that plants can thrive in, and if it's those plants that are so important to us, that food that comes off of those plants are so important to us, then knowing and having a better, even basic knowledge of what's going on in the soil is really important. And I think that was pretty immediate for me as just a regular home gardener, someone who's just growing in these, small spaces and learning about stuff. And I just hope that more and more people who are coming into gardening and learning about growing their own food and how important that stuff is, I hope more and more people do, for one, and then more and more people start taking a look at some of this, some of this information when it comes to taking care of their soil and all of our soil around us, basically.
Absolutely.
All right, real quick here too, man. We talked a lot of good soil stuff there too, but I just kind of want to get into talking about you a little bit here, get a little bit of history here. Matt Powers, you've written all these great books. You've turned into this great career into soil science and these things that you're doing in permaculture and all of that. But as we talked about in your bio, you were formerly a public high school teacher, and you even mentioned, an English teacher, not a chemistry teacher, which is what you would think, right? This guy's teaching chemistry. That's why he's,
It probably
talking
would have
about
been harder for
coffee
me.
and stuff.
It probably would have been harder for me to learn this actual soil chemistry if I had been teaching high school chemistry, because they teach it in such a way that it blunts our understanding of the actual way that chemistry works. It's wild. And I went to high school at a top 40 boarding school. I was really fortunate. And then the high school in my local town was the second in the nation. So I didn't go to bad schools, but this is why John Taylor Gatto wrote Dumbing Us Down and wrote about the propedeutic function, which is, I think, the sixth principle of Ingalls' principles of secondary education, which is that you only give a fragment of the real information to the ruling class's kids, and everyone else gets a jacked up version. Tommy Dowd, you guys know Tommy Dowd, the famous music producer. He worked on the Manhattan Project and then tried to go back to school. He couldn't talk about anything, and they were learning pre-World War II information, and it was all fake. And so he couldn't say the classified information that he had worked on in the Manhattan Project. So he left, and he became Tommy Dowd, the Columbia music production guy. So we have tangent. We have these opportunities to really dig into this information, but they really require us to be citizen scientists and to do the work, and often to get past the paywalls, to pay for the expensive books, to figure out what they're actually doing, to test their products and figure out what's actually in them. All of these things are necessary to really break through the narrative that they've created in science education. And so photosynthesis is taught improperly, for instance. If they taught it properly, everyone who heard about like their cars causing climate change would scoff and then point out all the other ways that things are actually working, because they would actually know the carbon cycle. I'm all for bringing carbon back to the soils, mind you, but it's really important to actually not greenwash things. And you mentioned it earlier, how there's so many charlatans in the gardening world right now. Yeah, we're being greenwashed right now because they want it to be all climate change related. It's like, you can change climate in a variety of ways. If we cut all the trees down in the area, it'll desertify, and that's a different climate. So if they want to fix climate change, they need to actually relate it to the actual indicators of what that change was related to originally, and then remedy those. And they know how to do it. That's the infuriating part about this. Large landscapes, the code has been cracked. Desertified large landscapes, no water, no fertilizer, no problem. We've cracked the code. We've known about it for decades. The World Bank, US government, Chinese government, all of them have been funding these projects. It's actually well known. So we really, that's why I think it was good that I was an English teacher, because I was focused on clarity. I was focused on alignment, and I was focused on verification that what I had taught you, you had actually learned. And so when it came to me teaching these principles, all in permaculture, I was doing them. So I was like, not only could I help you on that first level, I could help you on the second and be like, well, it's actually working right here. Let's go look at it together in real life. And so that's really where I come from. And it's because I have that different perspective, instead of just being one of the towing the line, or vocalizing the group narrative. I come from a very different place where I just want to help kids.
So did you grow up gardening? Is this something that you had around
I
you
was
when
a
you were
professional bass player. Just last week I was messaging Sean Pelton, Saturday Night Live's drummer. And then I was back and forth between him and Ty Dennis, who used to play with Robbie Krieger from The Doors. Those are my friends. I used to play with both of them for years. And so I'm still, and like Blondie's keyboardist, like Matt, I'm always like talking to Matt. So, and my best friend for years has been a producer in LA. That's where I'm from. My mom was a gardener, and where I'm from was like businessmen, and they weren't dad's gardening, Dads would help with the yard work. So I didn't even think about these things. I thought dirt was dirt. I played 4 strings. It wasn't so sophisticated. I actually kind of downplayed my vocabulary a bit, because I was studying like Shakespeare and like James Joyce. And so then I was like a bass player in a rock and roll setting. And so I was like I was living in a way that was very safe. And I was making good money playing bass a few times a month. I had a 2-story apartment in Brooklyn playing bass. And also working nightclubs. I worked co-check and catering and stuff in nightclubs. But my wife got cancer. And when we went through that, it became clear the doctors didn't know what they were talking about, or were outright lying. I asked them when it would be safe to have the baby around my wife after she was radioactive. I got 3 different answers from 3 different doctors. And then when I pressed about it, they got really defensive, really awkward, really weird. And then she got cancer again from the radiation. And they got even weirder after that. And so I was like, wow, I can't trust you guys at all. And so I've been studying to try to understand health this entire time. I also inherited Crohn's. And so I have flare-ups. One of the reasons why I'm so skinny is I can't really put on weight. Me now is big and has weight compared to what I was like 10 years ago. Like 10 years ago, I weighed 30, 40 pounds less.
Yeah.
So I'm doing good health wise.
I've got family members who've had Crohn's as well too, and actually had about when I was in my 20s with C. difficile. And that was, I was like, oh, you want to know how bad it is for someone who's got Crohn's? Try dealing with that for just a few days when you're.
I can tell you.
It's horrible. I mean, I can't imagine having to deal with that for sure. And yeah, my aunt, she has it, and yeah,
My aunt had
that's
it
a tough
too.
one. It's just so tough.
Yep.
And yeah, and then so what brought about your first garden then too? So you got this background, gardens aren't
So
part
I'm
of
like,
it or anything, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, let's start planting some things.
well, I was like trying to fight cancer, right? So I'm doing the
Okay,
juicing
yeah.
Gerson therapy, and I'm like, where are the carrots? I need more carrots. And
Yeah.
I'm like realizing, like, wait, where are these Cal organic carrots grown? Because we're concentrating these and then giving them to my wife. Is that good? And then I started getting local carrots from TD Willie. I started getting the funky carrots because you talk to the farmers, you find those funky carrots, and then you can get them for cheaper. So I started getting the funky carrots.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I need more. And so I started growing everything I could. So I started doing a garden so that I could supplement. Also, I couldn't afford the organic food. I was going into debt. I was like, I think $20,000 in debt at that point. Between all the medical stuff. It might have been 50. I don't know.
It can get high
When
with
I started
that.
my business, that fluctuated as well. But but you got to take dives, right?
That's
You
right.
got to
You gotta get out there.
you got to take giant leaps, sometimes into the unknown. And so we've done that a few times. This is my story. I was a bass player in Rachel Ray's husband's band. My wife got cancer. I quit the band. Everyone thought I was totally crazy. We moved out west. I lived in a garage for almost over 10 years, in a garage with my family. I was a public school teacher that was 20,000, maybe more in debt. And then I had a vehicle. And it was credit card debt. And I was on a debt. It was a dead end. Every single year, they would make you pay more per month for healthcare. So all the gains you would get in your raise and pay would be eaten. So I realized I was screwed. And so I was like, I got to figure this out. So I started growing food, started trying to save money. I started trying to figure things out. And then I did a Kickstarter and wrote a book that made as much money as I make in a single year after taxes, in a month. So I made that 26,000. Just goes to show you, teachers don't get paid much. And so it was just like, oh my word, is this possible? And like 4 months later, I tried to do another Kickstarter I did Indiegogo, another crowdfunder, failed miserably. So that was a hard road. That wasn't an instant.
Yeah.
It seemed instant, but then it was a journey. But it was the case that I became a teacher so that I could get healthcare for my wife. My wife kept getting cancer. We did the Gerson therapy that slowed it down, and it changed the kinds of cancer she got. So we moved away from like super danger into like melanoma. And then other things happened later on that are in the book, Unstoppable Enthusiasm, and miracles happened. We were able to create new cancer treatment protocols with teams of doctors, and so this is still a part of our journey. My wife's had cancer over 7 times.
Wow.
She has to be like incredibly careful of the sun.
I've got history with cancer. My daughter's mother passed away. Oh gosh, it's almost 10 years ago now too, from lung cancer. So I know that journey, and it was just, for us, it was quick, it was fast, there wasn't much thinking to be done around it, that sort of thing. And so I just can't imagine the journey of going through that ups and downs 7 different times, though, too. That's just got to be horrible. I really feel for you and your family for sure.
Well, it's definitely affected us all in different ways. My oldest son is a man. He's
Yeah.
16, but he's a man. Like, you meet him, he's 6 foot tall. It was 6'1". He's like 175 pounds, except he'll take on someone who's 250 and take them apart. Like, he is wild. I mean, he goes against adults in NAGA and ADCC and jiu-jitsu and gets gold every time.
Nice.
So yeah.
Talented kid.
But when I have Crohn's bouts and we've got all these animals and I'm like planting a field, and he is the hero. So my younger son has really helped in a variety of ways. So it's wild, because that's what happened to my grandfather, and I obviously am still here, but his father was a Brooklyn cop who was killed and shot on the job when he was 11 or 12, I think 12, and he started working at the New York Times as a runner boy, because he didn't have computers to like send things or fax things then, when he was 12, to provide for the family. And so James is like, he's a powerhouse. He's working on his 4th album right now. He's 16, and he records, produces, masters. He builds instruments. He definitely reacted in a way that was to become an incredible young man. So
yeah, that's awesome.
It's been hard, absolutely, but I believe that these challenges in our lives can be blessings, or can obviously different strokes, different folks, all times, all places. This is a world of variety, right? But there is a window at times that I see to transform our suffering into a blessing.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. I definitely live that in the same sense too. I look at my daughter and see that same sort of thing, that beauty and all of that. She's turned into just a wonderful young woman and everything, and even through all of that loss that she had to endure, and challenges and everything. We're all dealing with challenges, like you said, and in a lot of ways it's just about how we deal with them and how we persevere. It's really all we can do when it comes down to it. But it's how we do that, and that's just awesome. I love seeing your posts when you're talking about your kid and his music and all of that too. That's really awesome to have that sort of talent. I got music all over. In fact, there's guitars in the back. I can barely play a few chords, but I keep trying, and I keep going at it though too, because in my family are all musicians. My father's side, they're all musicians. My dad could play guitar, my uncles, everything from drums to they're all more like that old, like bluegrass type, play all of the instruments from we'd have these jams, family jams, where people are playing spoons and washboards and tub and all that sort of stuff, and tons of just music. My grandmother was one of the most amazing guitar players you ever seen. In fact, she used to be like a backup player for a bunch of like professional country musicians back in the day. I know one of them was like Marty Robbins, was really popular back in the day. She actually did backup playing for him when he'd come around in the area, because these musicians wouldn't bring a band with them around. They'd just get local musicians to play their live gigs for them and stuff. So my grandmother was one in the Pacific Northwest that did that, and she could really play amazingly. Could have had a really great career probably if there weren't other issues going on. But yeah, all in all, that point is that I don't know what it is, how that gene kind of tried to skipping over me, man.
Maybe you're a bass player.
Keep going at it and try it. I've tried the bass too. I've done
it. Boom. I don't know. Bluegrass, we're going 1 to the 5, right? Boom, 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 boom.
I think yeah, I think my thing is I really got to get down and just practice and do it, but then I get myself so busy in other areas that
it's
to find the time to sit down and actually figure them chords out and do that sort of stuff. But I don't know. I will eventually someday. I've challenged myself. Someday you are going to be able to play a whole song. and I'm going to do that someday for
I love
just
it.
at least one someday. Right on, Matt. Awesome to here. Let's dig in real quick into your actual garden and all of that. You are growing. What are you growing out there in your garden this year? What's some of your favorite things you got going on?
Well, it's an establishment garden. It's a new site. We're in Texas, just below Austin, between San Antonio and Austin. So we're below.
You did recently.
Yeah, from Northern California. So this is much more akin to Central Valley, California, where it's really, really hot. And so I'm like at home, and my seeds are like freaking out, and most of them are loving it. I'm figuring out, like, we had peak humidity, and then it hangs, which shuts down the evapotranspiration, process, which means calcium transport goes down. So you need to hit things with water soluble calcium to combat that, right? So I'm like mapping out the area, learning the quirks. Got amazing cowpeas. I've got the biggest squash queuing I've ever grown. And I'm like, I didn't intend to grow giants, but this year I've been growing giants. I mean, I grew like a 3-foot long, like 8-inch wide daikon radish earlier this year. And so I basically, this is the first site where I've been able to go all in with the regenerative soil practices. I was on a mountain while I was writing it and doing all the research. So and if you're in Northern California in the middle of a redwood forest, you don't knock down the redwood trees and then start a garden all of a sudden. That's not right. It's a redwood tree forest. You know what I mean? Yep. So I had these containers, and I had a little teeny backyard. And so I really couldn't do very much of anything, especially because the backyard was soil with landscaping cloth beneath, and they had to rip all that out. And so those situations. It was crazy. And now I'm in an agricultural area. It's just sand. It's really just sand. We're in the valley. And so I'm able to take this sand, which is just bacterially dominant, low organic matter, and remediate it. And I knew exactly what to do. And so I just applied it, and oh my word, the response has been wild. I put in a 40+ tree food forest at the same time this February when I started the garden. And
jumped right into the trees then, right?
Yeah. We put 250 strawberry plants in. We put 200 asparagus plants in. Asparagus plants are perennial. You plant the 3-year-old crowns.
Trees and then next year, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're the anchors of the system. And so I've got a lot of squash, a lot of cowpeas, a lot of I like bush beans because they are polite, and I can fit them in tightly together because they go up and then out like a little tree. And so I love the bush beans.
That term, they're polite. That's just great.
The cowpeas are sadly totally rude. They're like,
vining beans too. Oh my gosh, they're just a nuisance.
They're like, I'm just gonna go here, and then I'm gonna tighten here.
I'm gonna go over here and grab this over here, and I'm gonna yank it over this way, and I'm gonna go over here and take this and pull it out of the ground. Yeah. They can be
impolite. Yeah, and impolite. So and so I really like plants that I can chop and drop. I like plants that I can crowd without them fighting. And obviously you don't want to crowd too much because that has a redox effect and a photosynthetic effect. But if you're in a region where you need to hold water moisture in, that shade and that leaf to leaf pressure can help with that.
So what's one of your favorite things you grow? What do you grow that's your favorite that you do so well with? That was just I just love growing this.
I love well, I feel like I'm not yet to the functional stage where I get to do everything. So I'm still establishing things. So this year, the things that I love in an establishment are really the cowpeas because I love opening them and seeing the colors. And they're so prolific. I mean, they send out these long, really long bean pods or pea pods, and they just they're so much fun to open and collect. It's so easy. They just turn tan while everything's still green, so they're easy to spot. I love cowpeas because they're also a cover crop for the summer. They're also the bean with the lowest phytic acid. So if you're like, oh, I don't eat beans because they're going to block nutrients, this is the one. And then the leaves can be eaten. It's the only one where you can like eat the leaves and stuff. So there's a lot of survival aspects to it that I really like as well. I come from, you know, that place where things were constantly happening that were stressful. So there is a part of me that is prepper and has that somewhat paranoid thing going on, you know. I'm like, well, this will be able to eat this and we'll be able to eat that if like the power goes off for 3 weeks. Because when we were in Washington at the top of a mountain and got snowed in, we were without water for 9 days. So I just, and then the whole thing with Texas with the power outages, same thing.
Yeah.
I just always want to be ready. I always want to think in a multifaceted way. My son's hero is Tim Kennedy, and Tim Kennedy says, no one's coming. No one's coming for you. And more and more in our society today, with the way things are breaking, the way infrastructure is waning, the way our food systems are being poisoned, and the way they're breaking down, and the way that, I mean, why is foreign beef being labeled as grown in America when it's labeled here in America, and then our own graziers and cattlewomen of America can't get their cows to slaughterhouse here? Like there's something going on there that's fundamentally wrong. And so we are at we're in a strange place. And I personally do not feel safe and confident unless I have a food storage, a seed storage, a living garden that has a perennial anchor, and something always growing. And so I have enough seeds that we literally could eat half of them as seed sprouts and like survive for months. So I think like that, just so you know.
Well, that's a good way of thinking. I mean, you brought up a great example, Texas. You're living in Texas now, and they're probably one of our most recent examples of, like the grid just breaking down. I think they have their own independent grid or something like that.
Thankfully,
but, just it's all broke. When it breaks down,
it needs
you got to
be fixed and updated.
Take care of yourself for that time period that you're going to need to do that. You talked about being snowed in up in Washington. It's just one of the great things about growing stuff for yourself and learning food preservation and things like that, is to be able to make sure you've got yourself taken care of during some of these moments. We might, even though we live in this big large society, there are times where we're just kind of alone.
I was 15 minutes outside Seattle when we were snowed in. 15 minutes outside the city of Seattle. So this is not, this was a really nice neighborhood. We were in a house that is now abandoned and was condemned. So we were in a crazy
situation. What year was that?
A nice neighborhood.
Do you remember what year that was?
I
remember
2020 was in Guerneville, and I think we moved the summer 2019. So we were in Issaquah 2017, 2018, part of 2019, I think.
So in that time, okay.
And
it was a little bit while before, but I remember I had an instance. I lived in Kent, Renton, Auburn area. I lived there.
I know those areas.
Yeah. I lived there for many years. That's actually where I raised my daughter at, was in that area there. And I remember the year before we moved here to Southern Oregon was where I live now, in Southern Oregon, just really close to that Northern California area you were living in too. But just before we moved, we had a winter where literally everything just, you want to talk about like apocalypse, collapse, everything, electric was out. We're literally, we're still in the city. We're in the Puget Sound, large, metropolitan area. And we're literally stuck there in this apartment, just stuck there, nothing you can do. You can't go really anywhere to get anything. You can't, and you're stuck there waiting until all of this infrastructure can catch up and figure out what to do to get things back opened up again. And it's just simple situations like that. I can totally see why, you think in that thought process. I've experienced those same sort of things where, you can see why it's just kind of important to be able to take care, you know, and grow some things and have some things available for you in those sort of emergency situations. And
Yeah.
gardening and growing things for yourself is a great way to do that. And not only just empowering yourself with the knowledge of being able to do it, but having it there in a pinch, learning how to preserve food and do things like that. So
That's
I think those are
how
all just
all
really important things. And I think that's even for us here on my channel, what I do and push for a lot of people is to grow anything no matter where you live. I mean, I grow in small spaces. Most of I've got an all right amount of garden space on a back patio that I have, but a lot of my growing space is like along the alleyways. We're taking up
Mm,
unused city spaces, whether
that's
they're your
awesome.
curb spaces or your other spaces. There's tons of unused spaces, even for those of us who live in these metro areas, to, find ways to just grow something for yourself, and I'm
And
amazed
actually,
at how much food I can grow for myself in a small space.
yeah. And actually in those areas that are bounded like that, it's much easier to like do because they're, I mean, you've got all this concrete. And so all these areas where there are things growing, most of them are ornamental currently, and they're already respected places. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like people are like, oh, there's a tree there. Oh, there's plants there. And it's like
Yeah.
if we just switch those things out into a tree that grows fruit or nuts
Mhm.
or that will be respected by those people because it's already like programmed into their behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's awesome, man. I'm telling you what a really great conversation. How really awesome of you to take your time this Saturday to come join with us here on the Let's Get Growing show. Talk about all of this awesome stuff. Matt, it's been, again, like I said, I got to see you a few years ago and listen to one of your talks and get to run into you there too, and I thought, man, this guy's just got just a great personality and a great energy about you when it comes to the
Thank
sort
you.
of things that you're talking about, and really important information again too, as we've covered, about soil science and understanding that, that soil is the base, the medium that we use to grow all of this food that we want to grow in our gardens. And it's probably one of the most important things to understand, you know.
And it's
So
understandable. That's the
it
thing is
is.
they made gobbledygook of it, in
That's a good thing.
university science.
Yeah, in fact, that's a good way to end here. How about you got any like quick little couple of soil science tips for the home gardener that you could leave us with?
Yeah. I think number one, we want to think about when we're developing a site and gardening is that first season, whether it's the fall or the early spring, and maybe even that summer, we are really focusing on growing soil, not food yet. We're really focusing on building up momentum of fertility, creating structure, and creating the pieces to actually cycle things properly so that when we do introduce our plants, they're immunologically strong, they're
Mhm.
resilient to pests and disease, they're nutritionally dense. So instead of it, potentially being high nitrates because you put hot compost on there and now you're eating high nitrate, kale or something, which is really bad for our kidneys. You're actually having balanced compost, you're having balanced soil, and your food is as nutritious as it can be. Your food's inoculated so that it is getting phosphorus and nitrogen and all these things in the correct forms and at the levels, 10,000 times. It increases the mycorrhizal inoculants, increase root surface area by 10,000 times. So the amount of absorption and the amount of nutrition, it can't be overemphasized how much is waiting for us when we start using biology, when we start looking at our soil as a space that we prepare for our plants to enter, rather than just being like, well, we're going to mix in this fertilizer or this input and then plant, because that's not how it works. It needs to develop. You need to create momentum, and then you need to have the actual controllers, the microbes, working and active to keep things in bounds so things don't get crazy. The biocontrol is what they're called. And then the biofertilizers that are going to fertilize your plant in a way that nothing else can. So
a healthy active system. A healthy active system.
This is the book to get.
Regenerative soil. Absolutely. And for everybody who's watching the show right now, go check out and get a copy of Regenerative Soil. Check out Matt's books. Check them out at the permaculturestudent.com as well there too. I've got a link in the description below to go check that out too. Again, thanks again so much, Matt, for joining us on the show. Thanks been really awesome having you here. Great conversation. And hopefully again, sometime soon in the near future, we'll see you again.
For sure. For sure. Thanks.
All right. All right, man. You have a great day. Thank you.
Have a great one. Bye.
Hey gardeners, thanks for tuning in to our show today. We'll be right back at it here in just a moment. I just wanted to take a second here to highlight our regular videos and features here on the Urban Gardener channel. Our weekly garden journals, and our incredible feature visits.
All right. Another great show in the books here on Let's Get Growing. Thank you all so much here for being with us. And thanks again to Matt Powers for joining with us and giving us a great conversation on all different things about soil and soil science. And like you said, check out the link down below in the description and check out his book, Regenerative Soil, the Permaculture Student, and all of those really great things. And again, too, I just love when people are getting in and really looking at the real deal of what's going on when it comes to soil and soil science. It can't be repeated enough about how important that is when it comes to our gardens, even our home gardens, even our container gardens, being sure that we're in tune with what's going on with our soil and kind of how that system works and how that, all of that activity within our soil, the breakdown of all of this like organic materials and these, again, the nematodes, the microorganisms, the fungi, all these sort of things all work together in a system that really creates this really awesome soil that a plant can thrive in. And if we're paying attention to what's going on in the soil, taking care of our soil properly, then we're going to have plants that thrive. And Matt talks all about it, and he's really doing the science when it comes down to it. He's out there, with the microscope, getting into this stuff, digging down, seeing how these things all work and all of that, so that we can all have this information to help us out when it comes to taking care of our soil and making sure that our gardens are thriving, because that's, again, the most important thing is having great thriving plants so that we can have, the best harvests when it comes down to it. Again, so go check all of that out there down below. And as well, if you haven't already, to give the show a big thumbs up, hit that like button. And if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button and subscribe to our channel here, The Urban Gardener, and the Let's Get Growing show. And as I mentioned earlier, before our conversation with Matt, we are trying something out now where we're trying to set up a new channel for our Let's Get Growing show. So down below in the description, there is a link to our show's new channel. go over there and hit subscribe to that channel as well for us as well too. And again, we'll work this out as time moves on with the show and all of that, but eventually down the line we will have the show, you know, on its own channel, and eventually we'll probably just be showing the live version of the show here on the Urban Gardener channel. But we'll work all that out down the road as we keep growing on here on the Urban Gardener channel. And again, to be sure to share with all your friends too. Let everybody know about the Let's Get Growing show and all of our great guests. We're having some awesome conversations each and every week here with some really awesome people in the gardening world. And again, we have with us, let's see here, again, John Kohler. Yeah, I sat down and had a conversation. This will be a pre-recorded interview conversation, but I just recently sat down with a conversation with my good friend John Kohler, talk all about what he's got growing on this year and all the different things. He's even got some really cool, exciting kind of John Kohler breaking news and all of that. John's just a really great supporter of the Urban Gardener channel since the very, very beginning. He's one of those YouTube gardeners that I used to follow and watch and just get tons of advice and learn how to garden from for many years. And then eventually, as I started doing this channel and all that, got to meet him and got to know them and kind of develop a really cool friendship with John. And it was really awesome of him to sit down with us and do an interview. So we'll have that interview for everybody this next week on the Let's Get Growing show too. So be sure to come join with us this next week. Also, go check out our website, letsgetgrowing.live. And as I mentioned before too, the best way to support our show is to support our sponsor, IV Organics. Go to ivorganics.com, check out all their great, awesome products, and use our promo code GROW10, GROW10 in their shop and get 10% off of everything that they have available there. So excellent. Thank you all so much for being here with us this week. And from all of us here at Let's Get Growing, you all have a great week, and we'll see you all next Saturday.